If you haven't been paying attention, Bungie gave Banshee, the Gunsmith, a bunch of free weapons. This was the final result of the perk controversy that was uncovered a couple of months ago, where apparently for years now, perk rolls were not working as intended. So in response, Bungie put some of the rarer perk rolls that were super difficult to find straight onto Banshee for people to buy of their own volition. They've been out for a little while now, I know, but honestly this video is meant to be a reminder or an alarm to potentially unaware players that these weapons exist, and if you ever plan on returning to Destiny, you should probably just log in and get them, because it'll take like 2 minutes. But the question I would like to answer today is, how good are they really? The first weapon is the VSS Chill Inhibitor from Vesper's Host with Envious Arsenal and Bait and Switch. How good is this roll? It is the best roll of any grenade launcher in the game right now, and one of the best damage weapons in the game. There is zero reason to not buy this weapon. Buy it now, lock it, enhance it, put it down, flip it, reverse it, stop, drop, shut them down, open up shop, whatever you gotta do to keep this in your possession, do it. I'm just gonna keep that one simple. Just buy this one, okay? That being said, you do actually need to own the dungeon, which is part of the Final Shape dungeon key. And then I believe you also need to have cleared the dungeon. But like, it's a pretty good dungeon. It's literally the best thing that has released post Final Shape in my opinion, so, you know, it's worth a run. The next one is Multimach CCX from Iron Banner with attrition orbs and kinetic tremors. Now, kinetic tremors has been making its way around more and more weapons, and this isn't even the first time it's been put onto an SMG. It's actually the third time. But it's the first attrition orbs and kinetic tremors possible SMG. Attrition orbs have been getting a ton of attention lately, mainly due to VS Velocity Baton from Vesper's Host, which can roll this perk. A well-placed shot from Velocity Baton can net you 1 orb of power every single shot, which makes it an orb printing machine, which can enable a multitude of options for your build, your aspects, your fragments, what have you. Now, when I was working on a build video that never came to fruition, I tried a weapon setup on Void Hunter that used this SMG and Velocity Baton at the same time. The purpose of this build was to just print as many orbs as possible. However, I often found myself just using Velocity Baton to make the orbs because the orb generating ability of this SMG is not as good. It's not as good because most of the time, in lower tier content anyway, you tend to kill the target before an orb is able to be made, and this is mostly on red bar targets. On the other hand, Baton can make an orb on basically any target in almost any piece of content. The same feels like it goes for kinetic tremors. You will often kill your red bar target in low tier content before it actually activates. Now in your mid tier, your high tier content, this is much less of an issue, although a slight one for both perks. Kinetic tremors and attrition orbs activate more often because you're just not killing your enemies as quickly. All that being said though, if you are going to pursue any sort of orb printer build, I would likely still lean towards getting a Velocity Baton and primarily using that. This SMG is still worth grabbing and locking up in my opinion though, but it wouldn't surprise me if a lot of these were grabbed and started collecting dust in people's inventories going into the future. SMGs right now in PvE aren't exactly the hotness, but I think their time will come. And again, kinetic tremors in mid-tier content is still excellent. Next up, we have Rose with Slide Shot and Explosive Payload. This is the PvP role that people were hunting down, so PvE players can probably avoid this one. Slide Shot is overwhelmingly the favorite perk on this weapon in the first column. It's not that the other perks are that bad, but if you think about your favorite PvPer and think about how they likely play the game, well, they're probably sliding all over the place. So Slide Shot for them might be the best option. But if you don't find yourself constantly, and I do mean constantly, sliding, then you might not want that perk. You might not even want this weapon at all. Explosive Payload is essentially a small range buff allowing for a bit more damage from farther away because of the way the damage is split across the explosion and the bullet. Your total damage doesn't really change that much though. You maybe get 1 damage extra here or there, but that shouldn't be relied on. There is no shortage of good PvP hand cannons out there. That's not to say that I think you shouldn't grab this one, because I think you should, but it is more of a case-by-case basis, especially considering it's a PvP weapon. You might be someone who slides everywhere, or is someone who already really knows how to take advantage of slide shot. If you are, you likely have this already. If you aren't, well, I would still grab it, let it collect some dust, and then get rid of it the next time I drop a vault cleaning video. Next up is Indebted Kindness with Loose Change and Volt Shot. This is the first rocket sidearm ever released, normally looted from Warlord's Ruin. I find it funny that this is the most elusive role, and my buddy Jez managed to get 4 of these when he really wanted something else. And yes, I believe you need to own this dungeon and have run it as well in order to pick this up. Ironically, this is the least desired role by the community when combined with Volt Shot if we're using information from light.gg. The top 3 are actually beacon rounds, then impulse amplifier, and then lead from gold. Even offhand strike has been more desired, although not by much, but it's not like offhand strike makes no sense on this thing, because it's one of the few weapons in the game where it does actually make sense. I think people only think of beacon rounds as the tracking perk, but tend to forget about the reload part of the perk as well, although it does take a while to max out your reload speed since it requires final blows. This answer, I think, is pretty simple. If you don't have one already, you should buy this and should be using it. Rocket sidearms, as of this video, are still very, very good. The reason people want reload on this thing is specifically to apply jolt to a lot of targets, which is the entire point of Loose Change. You jolt something, preferably kill something as well, then you reload with Loose Change active and triggering a Volt Shot with it. However, it doesn't always trigger when using it against an enemy that will die in one shot, which I think is the main hang-up on this thing. Chances are also that you already have something you like using, but if you don't, this is a very good place to start and will be more than serviceable for the majority of the game's experiences. It's not like you need the God Roll to run a GM, it's mainly Volt Shot that you need, and in GMs, or, something around that, targets are a bit beefier, so you're not going to run into the one-shot problem nearly as often. Next, we have Compass Rose, a precision frame shotgun from Solstice of Heroes. This one has slide shot and snapshot sights. If there is one thing that tends to be a bit more clear-cut, it is PvP shotguns. When I see all of my friends using Matador, using Prophet of Doom, using Deadlock, even using the new shotgun from Episode 2, that is a signal to me that Compass Rose is likely not a meta-defining weapon. But what if you don't have any of those? Well, Compass Rose can at least get you started on your PvP journey. Yes, again, this is not a PvE shotgun, this is not a PvE weapon. Compared to Matador, it's got a little less range, a little less stability, and a little less handling. Is this something that the average player is gonna be able to feel in moment-to-moment gameplay? Highly unlikely. D2Foundry.gg says the ready time, the ADS time, and the stow time on Compass Rose is 0.02 seconds slower than Matador. Is that really going to matter to you, person primarily watching a PvE-based YouTube channel? Probably not. Now, the perk selection isn't as strong as what you could get on Matador or on a Prophet of Doom, but we don't get that choice anyway. It's these 2 perks, and that's it. Matador and Prophet also take a lot of hours to farm, especially if you want more than just the 2 main perks, although Prophet is craftable. So you can just take this freebie and be slightly less optimal, or go grind a bunch for some slight optimizations. Your call. I think this is a great way to get started, though. Finally, we have Hothead with tracking and clown cartridge. I will say that it is good to have some sort of tracking rocket in your arsenal. At some point, you will definitely find a boss that moves around a bit too much for you to hit normally, and simply hitting the boss is the goal, not even hitting it hard. When it comes to Clown Cartridge, it's a great perk, because the number one factor in a rocket's DPS is how often it can shoot. Being able to shoot 2 rockets per reload over 1 rocket is a significant difference maker. There are quite a lot of rockets with tracking already to pick from, although not as many with Clown Cartridge and tracking. What also matters is total damage. If you have all the time in the world, or maybe you're just not in a boss damage situation, Well, you don't need Clown Cartridge nearly as much since time isn't a factor, and it would then become more of a convenience thing. Hothead is a good place to start when it comes to having a roster of rockets. It's probably not the main rocket I would be using, but again, it is a good starting spot for new players, or those just lacking in the rocket department. Hitting your target is the most important thing when it comes to a rocket, after all. But it is definitely not the one capable of the most total damage. You'd probably be looking at Cold Comfort with Envious and Bait, or maybe an updated Tomorrow's Answer with Envious Arsenal and Bait to completely dodge having to reload altogether. So, in short, the majority of these weapons are at the very least usable, with some of them being incredible. Do yourself the favor, take the time to get them, and just toss them into your vault. If you miss out, it won't be the end of the world, but like, dude, you're at the end of this video. Like, you might as well, right? Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.